in Old Testament times, when a person was sold for 20 shekels as a slave, that meant that he was an immature person. And, you know, when you read about the beginning of Joseph's introduction and the way he bragged about this and that, he was quite immature. I think the best thing for Joseph would have been to keep his mouth shut, and then he wouldn't have had all those problems he had with his brother. Mm-hmm. Now, when Jesus was sold for 30 shekels, that meant back then, in New Testament times, a slave that was sold for that much was a mature slave. And you see the difference between Jesus and Joseph. Jesus wasn't a braggart, but Joseph certainly was. So after being sold into Egypt by his brothers, then everything seems to be going all right for a while. Then he has some problems with Potiphar's wife. And as we're going to see, Potiphar's wife is going to stir up a hornet's nest. So starting in chapter 39, verse 13, this is what it says. And so it was when she saw that And so it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, See how he brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. Oh, what a lie. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. Boy, talking about twisting the truth, right? Mm-hmm. And it happened, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. Isn't that just like the devil? Tells a whole bunch of lies with a little bit of the truth. Yeah, really twists it around. And now we're going to see what Potiphar's reaction to all of this is. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came to me to mock me. So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners are confined, and he was there in prison. If Potiphar had really believed his wife, if he had believed that she had had sex with Joseph, or Joseph had sex with her, then Potiphar would have executed Joseph right there on the spot. However, apparently, she had done things like this before. So the reason that Potiphar put Joseph in prison wasn't to keep him from getting to her. It was he was put there to prevent her from getting to him. So it was actually for safety reasons that Potiphar put Joseph in prison. Like I said, because if he had believed his wife's story, Joseph would have been executed without question, and that would have been the end of the story of Joseph. Mm-hmm. But notice what it says here. At verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor, in the sight of the prison keeper. So just like with Potiphar, God was blessing Joseph even though he was in prison. Now let's go on to chapter 40 again. I'm not going to read everything. All right, I'm trying to get through this. And Joseph's life is 13 chapters. And it would take forever if I did everything. So I'm just trying to highlight the important parts of Joseph's life. So beginning at verse 1, chapter 40, this is what it says. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord. Now we don't know what the offense is, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they ended up in the same place where Joseph was. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while. So we don't know how long they were actually there, but Joseph was put in charge of these two men. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in prison, had a dream. Now this is why this chapter is important. Each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. Yeah, of course, because they didn't understand what they had just dreamed the night before. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his Lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." Oh, my friend had to step out for a minute. So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Now look at Joseph's attitude here. You know, when he was 17, he was all like, look at me, hey, I'm going to be some person you all have to bow down to, which just irritated his brothers beyond anything, especially since he was like the second youngest in the family, and his brothers were much older. I'm sure they were irritated because of the fact that how could this little runt be a leader over us when we're much older than he is? Why aren't we being called to be a leader in the family? But anyway, so that's why Joseph's brothers were so angry with him. But notice, Joseph doesn't say, "Hey, look at me here." He says, so Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." So each of the two men is going to explain their dream. I'm going to have to read all this. Verse 9, "Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, Behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded. Its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." So that's the butler. Okay, that's his dream. Now Joseph is going to give the interpretation. This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now, within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, according to the former manner when you were his butler. But now Joseph asked his butler to do something. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews. Now, notice he says the land of the Hebrews. It wasn't Israel in Joseph's day. The name Israel wouldn't come until hundreds of years later. And even though Jacob was Israel, the nation itself would not be called Israel until the Israelites actually entered in to the land of Canaan hundreds of years later. So right now it's called the land of the Hebrews, or the land of milk and honey, or the land of Canaan. It could go by any of those names, and it all means the same thing, the same place. And also, I have done nothing here that they should put me into this dungeon. True, Joseph didn't do anything, but he's there because his master wants him there to be protected from his wife. Now, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there was 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost baskets were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate out of the basket on my head. So Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation of it. Verse 18. Mm-hmm. The 3 baskets are 3 days. See, again, 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree. I'm sure this guy wasn't very happy about that. And the birds will eat your flesh from you. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Yeah, for the next 2 years, Joseph was going to be in prison because the chief butler forgot about him until an incident happens in Pharaoh's life, and we'll discuss that next week. My name is Dave Martin. God bless you. Shalom. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.